Hello and welcome to Held in Our Hearts Baby Loss Podcast. We are an Edinburgh-based charity providing baby loss counselling and support for bereaved families. We are committed to ensuring that no family has to face their journey of loss alone, and we wanted to create this podcast to reach out and share stories, encouraging greater connection and understanding. Join us on our journey as we speak to a wide variety of guest speakers who have been personally affected by baby loss or who have been moved by it. Hello, my name is Angie and welcome to episode 12 of our podcast. Today I had the chance to chat to Nicola Welsh, Christy Mulvaney and Jenni Morris. Nicola is the CEO of the charity and is a bereaved parent herself, having lost her precious middle son Theo. Before joining the charity, Nicola had a career in teaching, then started volunteering for the charity after Theo died and took up the role of CEO 7 years ago. Christy joined the charity in March this year as a hospital-to-home worker. Prior to this, Christy worked as a bereavement worker for Richmond Hope and is currently doing a master's in therapeutic work with children and young people. Jenni also joined the charity in March as a hospital-to-home worker, but came to the role from her own experience as a bereaved parent to her son Theo, who died 10 years ago. Jenni is also a trained counsellor for pregnancy counselling and care and is passionate about ensuring families get the support they need from the start. We discussed our new pilot project, Hospital to Home, which will support bereaved families as they transition from a hospital to community setting. Nicola shared her own journey getting support after her son died and her hopes for this new project. Together, Jenni and Christy spoke about how they became involved and their own hopes for the service and how it will help families feel less alone in their grief. I hope that you found our conversation insightful and that you have a better understanding of this new service and how we want to support families reaching in rather than families having to reach out. As always, if you or anyone you know has been affected by baby loss, please reach out to us at heldinourhearts.org.uk, or if you prefer, you could email us on info@heldinourhearts.org.uk. And now, let me introduce the lovely Nicola, Jenni and Christy. Welcome, Nicola, Christy and Jenni. Delighted to have you here today for our 12th podcast. This week is the UK's National Mental Health Awareness Week with a theme of loneliness. So it feels apt that we're here today to discuss our new project, Hospital to Home, which will help to address the overwhelming loneliness families face after their baby has died. If I can come to you first, Nicola, welcome. Could you share with our listeners today, what is this new innovative project, Hospital to Home?
So much to say about the new project. I guess if we go all the way back to its initial concept and where it came from was, as many people know, I'm bereaved myself. And I had phenomenal care. My son lived for 3 weeks in the hospital where I got compassion from all the intensive care nurses and compassion when he died and got time with him. So I could never fault that. However, it essentially felt like falling off the edge of a cliff when I came home. And I used to perhaps think it was my own personal experience, but over the years, that has struck me and stayed with me that there is a huge gap in care. It's not a blame or a fault because, many of the health professionals are absolutely trying their best. But we do know that particularly for those under 24 weeks, they may actually have no visits or care come to their door almost. And, it strikes me like right back at that time, I totally remember thinking, I would honestly give a limb if somebody turned up at my door and said, "How are you?" Like that has always been like something that is like right at the core of like thinking the pain at the time was desperate for somebody just to come and say, "But how are you doing?" I totally remember my family talking about it as well. Like my mum being like, is this how it is? Like, is there nobody coming to see you? I think, it's like any experience in life, unless you've been there, does it then strike you that, is that how it looks? So as much as we've developed like so much in our care around not only at the time of families spending with their baby, we have improved in many ways our communication and opportunities, but I do believe there is still a gap, and hospital to home is the hope and the dream of filling that gap. So it's to fill that transfer of families as they leave the hospital. So somebody will be offering that support, that reaching in really is what we're calling it, rather than families reaching out. And actually, sometimes it's not until we really think about it do we realise what we've been doing for so long is saying to families, if you need help. I think that in itself is like, it's really upsetting. And, the thought of somebody asking a bereaved parent if they'd need help, sometimes I find it almost quite ludicrous when I say it out loud, because to say goodbye to your baby that you love and had all these hopes and dreams of for the future, to know whenever your last goodbye is that you'll never see them again, and for somebody then just shortly after to say, if you need help, here's a leaflet. It just doesn't feel right. And the more I say it, it just doesn't feel right. So the whole project is around making sure that we do the hard work for families. That's how it should be, for many different reasons. We'll maybe touch on that. But it is to fill that immediate gap from hospital to home for parents.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing as well about your story and your son. It feels, sitting here in 2022, almost unimaginable that you would be expected to be given a leaflet and be sent home and to reach out if you need help. The idea that you wouldn't, and that you can get on, it feels like it's, as you say it, and listening to those words today, it feels like it's absolutely the wrong way to go about it. So it's wonderful to be able to share about this new project and this different approach to providing care. So, speaking from your experience and now sitting as Chief Exec of Held in Our Hearts, how did the idea come about, and how did it come into fruition with NHS Lothian?
So the idea was around before COVID, and the hope was in 2019 that conversation might be had. I'd kind of floated ideas around, I suppose, with some of the team and maybe even with some families, that thought of like how that would feel. So knowing that, that was something I would really like to tackle. I suppose any idea and vision for the future is always, it starts with an idea and then in shaping how you might tackle that in the best possible way. And interestingly enough, it actually was sparked by a neighbour who worked for Chest, Heart and Stroke. And it was in the days when you couldn't go out, you were like one walk a day. And she had moved into the area, and I met her for the very first time over my fence in the back garden. And she was introducing herself. We started talking about, we both worked for third sector. And I think I shared the idea with her because I was saying how worried I was about families. I was incredibly worried about families being isolated and lonely. I mean, goodness, it's such an isolating experience anyway. But in COVID, that was the whole charity was thrown into, we cannot imagine how this must feel, not to have all your family and those supports around you until it's a baby in such a silent, difficult time of life in the world, really. And she had mentioned that they had a project, I think it's maybe called Hospital to Home. And it sounds crazy to say, but it was one of those moments, like those light bulbs where you just go, why are we not doing it? So why aren't we doing this now? We need to do it now. I was almost going to put it on hold for COVID. That's how I felt. Well, we've got enough going on. We didn't furlough staff. We kept working. So it was like, there's a lot going on. We just need to park this just now. It'll still be there. We'll pick it back up. But actually that conversation made me really think, we must. And actually, if you look at other healthcare areas, we know that you wouldn't send somebody home. So the same for cancer. My mum had palliative care. She had terminal cancer. And I was part of that journey with her. And again, it struck me that nobody would ever say to my mum, if you're struggling looking after yourself while you're dying with cancer, here's a leaflet. Like there wasn't. There was a palliative care nurse, and there was support offered to her in abundance, actually, in many places that she could go. And yet, I was faced with knowing that these families that were supporting babies were still dying and were on their own. So really, that is how it started. And then I had a conversation with the director of midwifery at the time, who's now retired. But I put the conversation over to her on the telephone, just a simple, here's what I would love to do. I really think it would be an amazing project. It would be incredibly innovative. What do you think? And actually, at the same time, Australia are doing a similar project. They hadn't even started though, and I'd reached out to them. I just happened to see it all kind of came. It's a bit like that. I don't know if you can say that universe pool sometimes. There's a multiple layer of signs and energies come to draw you into going, now's the time. And then when the director gave me the go ahead to more or less say, yep, let's do it. That was it. It was really exciting because it was like, okay, like NHS are more or less saying, yep, let's get this going. And then it was just some like conversations to follow on from there.
That's just incredible. I'm sure, like me and the listeners today, to think of a conversation sparked through lockdown, those back in those days where you weren't allowed to be out and about over the fence, and then to think now where we are and, that it's starting. And also to think that that's happening on the other side of the globe as well. It's amazing. I believe like you in that stars aligning and the right time at the right moment.
Yeah, we should do a podcast just on that. Got a whole 100 stories about stars aligning, but yeah, not for today.
We could talk for days on that. Brilliant. Thank you. So just so that we're clear, so people can understand the difference, because as a charity, we provide bereavement care, long-term peer support and specialist baby loss counselling. But why is this different from current baby loss bereavement care and the bereavement care that we offer as well?
Mm-hmm. So I suppose the most striking difference is it's targeted at the moment. So it is support for families who've lost a baby between 14 and 24 weeks. I understand that anybody listening to this might then think, but why just that area and what about everybody else? And of course, everybody else deserves the same care. And of course, everybody else deserves like people to be there for them, and they shouldn't be doing the hard work. But actually, there are movements and improvements and areas of work going on within NHS and in the community and other third sectors around that. There's the MBCP of Scotland as well. So the specific reason for looking at under 24 weeks is we know that those families in particular are often isolated in their grief because of what I spoke about earlier about people not coming out. Also, it's quite misunderstood to have a pregnancy and a little baby die at, say, 15 weeks. I think many people don't know what that means. They don't know what that might look like to meet your baby. They don't know what that might feel like. And then if we don't know and understand, often society sadly then go into, well, I don't know, so I'll not have that conversation because how would I know? So it's another area of shut off because it's like, I don't know how to broach this. Do I call it son, daughter? Do I ask if they named their baby? So all that greyness and unknown is then felt by the families. So the difference is it is targeted into that area just now anyway. It may not always be for that gestation. And the main difference is the opt-out, rather than opt-in. So at this point in time, across the globe, really, apart from Australia, but the way we support families is to offer our support, and we do that ourselves in the charity through a memory bag that the families get in the hospital, a leaflet, a conversation, and also that opportunity maybe to share that there is a charity. Here's what they offer. So we have our peer support, as you already mentioned, and our counselling. They will all obviously still exist, and they will all exist for these families. But what we don't do as a service is, one, have the referrals come into us from the healthcare. So that's across the UK as well. Healthcare at this point in time do not refer families for support. They more or less manage that support themselves. And that's why I believe there's such a huge variation, because every health board does it differently. But also some health boards have thousands of loss and others very few. And some areas have magnificent third sector support and community support, and others none. So that's where the variation, that's where that postcodes lottery phrase comes in about care across the whole of the UK. And what we're trying to do here is provide that equality of care. So we know that for families where there's been challenges in the past, and we feel this in our organisation as it stands now, is that for many parents, it's a really challenging conversation or email to start. I know that myself. How do you just wake up one day? What day is it where you go, I'm not doing okay. And what do you ask for? Like, what do you say? Like, if somebody says, what do you need? I wouldn't have any idea what I needed. I just needed to survive. And I could only do that by breathing. But ask me anything else, I didn't know. I just needed the pain to go away. And I needed somebody to tell me that I would maybe have a hopeful future, because at that point I didn't believe I would have a future. It just felt so bleak. So what do you ask for? Like, and I think we just don't underestimate or don't understand really the impact on families, and that trauma that often they endure. Like, it's a primal response to protect your baby. So at the moment, the families have to do that sort of step first. And we know that, like, many families might not trust services and organisations, so they might not in the first place even just want to reach out at all. So the main difference is that the hard work will essentially be done for them. So we'll hear from Jenni and Christy, who will be at the front line supporting families, and they will be able to link them in directly with the peer support or counselling, but also other agencies as well, and the siblings and the families. So again, going into their home, like what will be offered to the families. And at this point in time, we don't offer that within the charity. So it's a new way of reaching into families.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. So I think what I'm hearing really clearly is the idea is to really change the way that bereavement care is offered. So rather than encouraging families to reach out, and I know from conversations that I've had with the team and with families that the real fundamental challenges of making that call or reaching out and saying, I need help. And it's changing that conversation entirely, saying you do need help and we're there for you, so that we are reaching in from the very start. Yeah. So I think the premise is really, really quite groundbreaking for what we're trying to do, and hopefully we'll see the results through the project. And talking of the project, so pleased to have Christy and Jenni, who are brand new into their roles. I think they're just over a month into their roles as hospital to home workers. So we'll turn to you now both. It would be lovely to hear from you about what drew you to the role in the first place. If I could come to Jenni first, please.
Hi, Angie. I had very personal reasons for being drawn to the role. I lost my little boy Theo in 2011, and that was a midterm loss, so right in the bracket of people that we will be supporting. When I had Theo, I had a period of time in the hospital between when I knew that he was going to die and being born, and felt very lonely and felt that there was nobody there to support me. And I remember asking, there must be somebody that I can talk to. There must be somebody that has been through this before, and just being met with blank faces. And when I gave birth to Theo, which was not what I expected for it being, a miscarriage, I went through my labour and my birth, and it was very similar to the births of my older children as well. But when I left the hospital, I said, what happens next? And it was just nothing. You can get in touch with your community midwife. So I'm not really the type of person that does ask for help as well. So, the next day I was distraught, as you can imagine, and reached out to the community midwife, left a message, and she turned up at my door and just looked puzzled. I don't understand why I'm here. You've not got a baby. And that just really shut me down from seeking any more support. I like what Nicola was talking about with, the stars aligning. And I had recently become friends on Facebook with somebody who I didn't really know, and it was strange the way that came about. But when she heard that I had lost Theo, she got in touch and told me about her baby that she had lost full term. And she encouraged me to get in touch with Held in Our Hearts, which was NHS Lothian's at the time. And without her encouragement, I wouldn't have made that contact. But she made me realise that, that was something that I deserved, it was something that I needed. And I suppose in reflection of that, if people like her hadn't have made contact with me, I probably would have tried to deal with it on my own. There's a lot of, for me, there was a lot of shame around not being able to carry my baby to full term, with not doing the job of a mum to protect your baby. So it felt really difficult to ask for help. I felt that I didn't deserve that help. So when I saw the role advertised, I was just blown away. I thought, this is what I needed. This is what everybody needs. And I was delighted that I was successful.
Thank you so much for sharing, Jenny, and thank you for sharing about your son Theo as well. I think listening to you today, I just think it's heartbreaking. I'm sure listeners will agree. Thought that you felt that there wasn't that support, and it just feels almost inhumane to think that there isn't, and that you're met with blank faces and you're expected to get on. And when the community midwife came, is that, and that's what we hope for this project, that there is that support from the very, very start, so that there isn't that difficulty. And you happen to get in touch with the charity, but you might have been left to get on, and that's our concern and our hope with this project, that we'll be able to meet those families and to fill that gap. So it's wonderful. I think there's a theme running through this podcast about fate or stars aligning, depending on what you believe. But it's wonderful listening to you today and knowing how much your wealth of experience and your own lived experience as mum to Theo will help those families in the project. So thank you.
Thank you.
So moving on to Christy, if I could ask you the same question, what drew you to their role?
I think when I first saw the ad in the paper, I was really quite excited by it, because I've worked in bereavement before I was successful in getting this role. But the thing that I noticed was it was very much about the families making that first move to access that support. And when they did get the support, that was really great. But I felt there was a lot of families that was a big barrier to, and they just were not getting that support whatsoever. I worked over many years in the voluntary sector, and I've worked with young people, and I've worked with families with problematic drug and alcohol use, and families that are really struggling with their mental health. And it made me think about those families and the fact that I don't feel that they were getting that bereavement support that they ought to. And I feel this role, being able to be there at the start, and it's about hospital to home workers, it's us doing the work, rather than it being placed on the families, was something that really appealed to me, because I know that's what it has to be to make a service as accessible as possible. And I'm really quite passionate about accessibility. I've worked with a lot of sort of young people, 18 plus, that really don't get access to services. And I think a service like this is amazing, because it can target young people at the hospital. It can target young men that sometimes don't always get seen in bereavement, baby loss services. I think it can target families where there's a very chaotic lifestyles, and another trauma is just sort of put to one side. And I've seen that myself with the families and some of the women that I've worked with. So I really felt that this project, getting them in there early into the hospital, is a really important way of the service being as accessible as possible to as many people, and just being there to be part of their journey at that early stage, and for them to know that there's someone there to support them through what is a really difficult time, especially in a hospital, because I think, having worked in a hospital in the past, it's a difficult place to navigate for anyone. And when you're going through that level of loss and trauma, it's very difficult to work out what you want and what you need at that time. And I think hospital to home will be able to bridge that gap so that people can get further support when they get home as well. So I'm really excited about getting started and just making it absolutely as accessible for everyone. And there's absolutely no barriers to getting that support, whoever you are.
Thank you so much, Christy. That was great. I can hear how much passion you have for the project, and I think you have so much experience with what you will bring to it. So delighted that you're on board with it as well. And I think you touched on some real fundamental issues around access and equality, and I think that's exactly what we want for this project, to make sure that those families who might not reach out or might fall through that gap, that we're able to get them from the very start and build that trust, which is just going to be absolutely key for the success of this project. So looking to both of you in your new roles, what do you think this support might look like for families? If I can come to you first, Jenni.
Well, I'm hoping as early intervention as possible. I think that's key for me, that families are supported, right from the start, and that maybe even before their baby has died. Having somebody to, walk that journey with them, and be that listening ear, offering advice. Obviously, we've both had lots of contact with families that have been bereaved in the past, and using that experience from what other families have told us to help guide them, because sometimes it is really scary and you don't know, should I see my baby? What about a funeral? All these things that you never think when you first become pregnant that you're going to have to think about. And then all of a sudden, you're faced with these decisions when you're distraught, numb, grieving. So really just to be that person that's going to support them and help them do what feels right for them.
Great, thank you. I think it's that word that keeps coming up that I'm hearing is really that sense of guiding and navigating what is a journey that no one is expecting to make or to answer questions. No one becomes pregnant thinking of what might happen, what might be the worst situation that happens. So seeing your roles as someone that can help guide and support and provide that practical and emotional support at those early stages, facing those labyrinth of questions and situations that they would never have dreamed of. If I can come to you, Christy, if you've got anything to add around what the support might look like for families, maybe about the time frame that families could expect.
Well, hospital to home would work with a family for 3 months. So that would be up to about 12 sessions. And those sessions, I think, would be very much led by the needs of the family. So whether that would be in their home, whether it would be over Zoom, or however that would be shaped, it would be very much in collaboration with the family. So it would really be focusing on their needs, and each family's needs might be very different. And really just what Jenni was saying about walking that journey with them, supporting them through all the difficulties that they're going to face. But it's very much led by the needs of the family and what they need from the service.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think that's very much our approach to all our work is person-centred. Families, every journey is different, and building the supports around them. So this would be an extension of that. Thank you very much, both. So if I could move to think, it's a brand new project, it's innovative, and we're all excited about what it could look like. But what are your hopes long-term for the project? Nicola, if I can come to you.
I think we want to identify there's a PhD, I don't think we've mentioned that yet, but there's a PhD actually studying it for 3 years. And I think we really want to highlight that early intervention can do a number of things. It can reduce the isolation, it can validate some of those intense feelings, it can support a family and lay some solid foundations for them to be able to move forward. It can link them in with other health professionals that may be needed, and also with our peer support and our counselling services as well. So it's a really easy transition for them. And I think if I was going with the big hope and the big vision, is that we actually fundamentally change how we do bereavement support. We recognise that families leaving the hospital there should be an automatic sort of link almost with somebody in their community. So being able to really demonstrate that the days of, if you need support, here's a leaflet or here's a memory box if you reach out. I think doing the hard work, if we can showcase that, then perhaps what we could see is in 5 years' time, maybe we'll look back and think, I can't believe that families used to go home and not know that somebody was going to come and visit them, that somebody, might not ever get in touch until there's a review, or also that understanding that how we treat trauma. Again, it's another area of work. We're a trauma-informed charity, and we're ahead of that curve, I believe, in our understanding of the impact on families with PTSD and complex PTSD. And of course, Jenni and Christy will be able to identify early on perhaps any concerns that they have for somebody. But because I think what's really interesting is people don't know if they're traumatized. And so we often will hear people say, well, I don't think there was trauma. I don't think they experienced trauma. But the thing about trauma is it's not for us to say whether it's trauma or not. It's around how that's processed for an individual person. And that will vary from the same experience would be experienced differently in how it's laid down and how it's remembered for everybody. And so it's not for us to judge whether it was traumatic. And I think in this day and age, we kind of still sometimes do that. So again, we want to really show that there is no judgment on loss. We need to be offering equal support to all. And again, culturally, we haven't mentioned that, but we know that in some Muslim families, the woman is not allowed to leave the home for the first 40 days. So if we know that, then if charities are inviting somebody in, or if they're asking if they want support, it's probably very unlikely that the extended family would be encouraging that through their beliefs. So we shape that for everybody, not just those families that feel they can reach out. So the hope for it is that we absolutely change how we offer bereavement support, I think, from my point of view.
Great, thank you. And can I ask, so at the moment the project is based in NHS Lothian, so it's a Lothian-based project. Is there a long-term hope for it to go wider?
For sure. If we can show that something works and it's successful. And of course, what we'll have is all these testimonials, these voices and experiences from families, and hopefully the extended family. This includes siblings. This includes, them going back to work and supporting them at a time of having to speak to employers. And there's many aspects of it that will really lend itself, I hope, to that confidence in entering the world again. And if we can show that early intervention is important and really essential, then yeah, absolutely. Australia, I think, is the leading sort of project. It is now run across all 5 states in Australia and funded by the federal government. And I think that is a real pat on the back of saying, you've shown that this is essential, and we're going to support you to make sure that all families in Australia have this. So, if we've got a goal to match, it's that nobody goes home waiting if somebody might or might not. We have to take that away. And the project's got the opportunity to do that for certainly the whole of Scotland is our initial ambition, but others across other countries, but certainly in the UK for sure. Let's do it. Let's show everybody how it can be done, I think.
I think that sounds great. I feel like the ambition is there, and I think listening to you all today, the fundamental idea that people go home, facing the nightmare of baby loss, but they go home knowing that someone will be in touch and know that support is there from the start. It sounds like it's going to be an incredible project. But it brings me on to my next question. So that's the ambition. What do you foresee as any challenges with bringing this project from pilot to full project?
I think right now, as we stand today having this conversation, is probably sharing the project wider. So, we've got a huge healthcare professionals. I think there's maybe about 700 midwives. I may have just made that number up in Lothian. So that's a lot of people to learn of the project. We need to make sure that the language is right. So this is very much about changing how we communicate with bereaved families. And I was really privileged to be part of the Scottish Government baby loss paperwork after the Morton Hall scandal a good few years ago now, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, since the paperwork came into fruition. And what we saw there was by changing the order and what we offer families, that would you like the hospital to organise a funeral for you, or the first conversation is, you can organise your own funeral. You'll be able to find a funeral director who will be able to do that for free. These are the experts that will be able to support you at this time. We saw an incredible change in families offer, and percentage-wise, I want to say it was 70 to 80% of families were using hospital support funerals, and I'm sure it's something as low as 20 to 30% now. And I mean, it's about personal choice, isn't it? There's no right or wrong way to do it, but I think what we've learned is those conversations at the beginning really lay down how we move forward. So our job is to make sure that what we do is change the language. So this is about saying we work with our colleagues in Held in Our Hearts, and they can get in touch with you either by phone or email, unless you would prefer, of course, that they didn't. But I think it's that offering up, making it really easy and smooth, a smooth process. So our challenge right now is around that, is making sure that people are aware of those conversations and the processes, so that it's, it's tight and it works. And I think once we have all that in place, I think we can then get running with the project. So I think that for me right now, that's probably the biggest challenge.
I think getting around 700 midwives is quite the challenge. How about yourselves, Christy and Jenny? New in, you're 6-7 weeks in now. Are there any other challenges that you see?
Yeah, I agree with Nicola. I think that will be a challenge. One that I'm ready to take on, but definitely a challenge to just get our faces known with everybody. Because I know myself, I wouldn't want to be recommending somebody without knowing who that person was. So Christy and I have had a chat, and we're really keen to get out there and meet as many people as possible, as many midwives, so that they know who we are and they feel comfortable in taking our service forward, and supporting families to get in touch with us.
I think as well, thinking as you're talking, I think it's the luxury that we have now at the stage that we're at, that we are able to do that face-to-face. I think a challenge that we could have that we hopefully will not have is being able to see people face-to-face, and for the staff to get to know you as well as they can as well. Christy, are there any challenges that you can foresee?
I think it's just that initial bumpy stage, isn't it? That sort of getting into the hospital and getting to know everyone and everyone knowing what you do. So I think it's just that initial stage of us all sort of working together and finding the best way that we can all work together so we provide a really good service. But I think in time, once we've all got sort of used to each other and familiar, I think that we can overcome that. But it's that thought of that first sort of, it's a wee bit bumpy to start with, and I think it's something me and Jenny will have to really work hard at sort of building those relationships. But hopefully, once we get that foundation in place, then it can be really positive for all the sort of families getting involved if we can all sort of work together with NH staff in a really positive way.
Absolutely. I think that is key, isn't it? It's the communication and the trust that you need to embed between ourselves and NHS Lothian, and just building on that. You're new into your roles. And I think, to my mind, that's all in the background, isn't it? And it's just making sure that all makes the service and the support to families as seamless as possible. So it takes any onerous challenge out of that, and that we can work together and build on that. So we've touched on this a little bit, but I think it'd be a nice question to ask you at this stage. If we were to fast forward and look at the future of baby loss bereavement care, maybe 3 years down the line or 5 years down the line, how do you think hospital to home will change that?
That's a great question. That it's almost like how we do cancer care now. I think we have to remember that other healthcare areas have had these challenges in the past and they've overcame them. So I think cancer is a good one to look at. If we went back, say, 20 years, people didn't really talk about cancer. It wasn't really acknowledged the same. It wasn't spoken about so publicly. And actually the services and the support that we had wasn't in place for those families. And we fast forward now and, everyone should be incredibly proud of how progressive that's been and how open we are. I do believe baby loss is the same. I do hear people sometimes still talking about it being a taboo, and I always think I don't think that we're not talking about it. I think some of the taboo lies in people's own fears of that. So I think we've made progress. If we look at even 10 years ago and how we supported families at the time of birth, with spending time taking photographs, inviting other family members in, taking locks of hair, footprints, handprints, all these amazing memory-making opportunities that we give families now, they were not offered to all families 10 years ago. Now that, in some ways now we think, I can't believe it. We hear of what families can do now. I really hope that that's exactly what will happen with bereavement care. So we will then be looking back, and I touched on that earlier, and saying, gosh, I feel for those families. They used to go home and they weren't always sure if somebody was going to be in touch. Or I would like to think that we almost think, I can't believe that families had to call for support. We want to progress it to the same standard of other areas where we recognise the trauma that it is. We recognise the incredible impact on those people's lives. And we step into it. It's an automatic. Nobody thinks about it. Nobody considers if they'll need help. Nobody is speaking to each other saying, do we give them this? Do we not? It is just an automatic. It just becomes second nature. You're a student midwife and you graduate, and as a midwife that one of the conversations you have is somebody will be in touch with you and this is how it's done. And they'll be able to come out and visit you and offer whatever support. So, that needs to be how we move forward with this, so that we see it as, as a crisis in someone's life.
Absolutely. And I think it's this point, isn't it, reflecting on where we are. And I think the parallel that you draw with how aware we are and how much we talk about cancer and how prevalent it is, and that care and support is there as a given. I really hope sitting here today, if we could fast forward 5 years, that it's a completely different conversation. And it feels right that we're talking about it today. It's Mental Health Awareness Week, and that is all about opening up those conversations and trying to reduce the impact of loneliness, talking about our mental health, talking about how we're feeling. And I hope, like you, that this project really, really opens up those conversations and it becomes the norm that families get that support from the very, very first moment, from the hospital and homeward. Christy and Jenny, is there anything you'd like to add about what that future might look like? We're doing a bit of fortune casting and looking to the stars, what 5 years' time might look like, but it'd be lovely to hear your thoughts as well.
I think I would just echo what Nicola said. I think she has put it beautifully, that's what I would hope as well, that this is just an automatic thing that people do, and don't stop to think about it, and families get that support right from the start, so that their path can be different from what my path was.
Thank you. And Christy?
I think very similar to what we've spoken about, just that it's the norm that there's a wraparound care for any family that's in the situation, and it's not optional, it's just the norm, and that's what I'd like to see happen, definitely.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing, and delighted that you're able to come today and talk about the project and what it's looking like today and what our hope is for the long term. So we now move to our final question, which we ask all our guests. So I'd like to ask if you could share one thing today that you're grateful for. we'll go in the reverse order. So I'll come to you first, Christy. One thing that you're grateful for today.
Well, I got up really early this morning. I got up at 5:45, which is early for me. And I got straight out of my bed and I got straight into my wetsuit. And I did not think about it. And I walked straight into the sea and I went for a swim, and it was cold, but being in the water on my own, looking out on the sea, just gave me that time in my day to reflect and gather my thoughts and have some time to myself. And the fact that I was able to start my day like that means that the day will be fine. That's what I always think. If that's the day, the way I start, then anything that comes my way will be fine. Yeah.
That's a wonderful thing to share with us. I think you're mad, personally, but I know many people I know that they really, really enjoy swimming, and I think it's the clarity of thought and the mindfulness that it gives. So that's a brilliant thing to share with us today. Thank you. And Jenny, over to you.
Nothing nearly quite so profound. I am self-isolating just now with COVID, and I am just very, very grateful that this is not a TV interview and you can't see how terrible I look.
I think you look great.
How very shallow of me. But it's the truth. That's how I'm feeling today.
I think you're underselling yourself, to be fair. You look great, but we're grateful. We're grateful to you for I think it's the wonder of technology that you were able to join us despite having COVID. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And Nicola, finally over to you.
So I knew this question was coming, interesting, and I didn't give it any thought until then you reminded me. And actually what came up for me is I am grateful to our healthcare professionals today. I am grateful that anybody chooses to go in to the work of midwifery or healthcare, because if we're looking at the care of women and their partners, then it starts there, doesn't it? That somebody is there holding your hand right from that very first moment that you hear very painful news in your life. So today I'm grateful for all of them, and if I'm allowed to add on a wee extra, I'm grateful to Jenni and Christy for being the pioneers in this hospital to home project. I know they're going to be incredible, and I'd love to think we do a podcast in a year's time and we're telling you different stories of the testimonials and the incredible work that everybody's doing. So yeah, I'll stop there. I've got lots to be grateful for, but let's stop there.
Oh, thank you very much, Nicola. That's a wonderful note to end on as well. Acknowledgement that we wouldn't be doing this without in partnership with NHS Lothian as well. And I will echo your gratitude to all three of you for your time today and sharing your own stories and experiences. A huge thank you to you all, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Angie.
Thank you.
Thank you so much again to Nicola, Jenni and Christy. I hope that you found our discussions today helpful in gaining a better understanding of our hospital to home project and how important it is for bereaved families to have compassionate support at that early stage. I hope that the conversation gave some comfort, knowing that we are working to reduce the overwhelming loneliness bereaved parents feel, making it as easy as possible to get support and fundamentally changing the way bereavement care is given. As always, please reach out and follow us on our website heldinourhearts.org.uk or email info@heldinourhearts.org.uk if you need support or if you would like to know more about our hospital to home project. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and LinkedIn. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you will join us again next time.